Hello, class. This is Demetrius Wilson again with Chapter 11 in Supply Chain Management. I will try my very best to make this lecture a little bit shorter. This week, we won't have a quiz. We do have a discussion assignment on there listed, but we won't have a quiz this week because next week we will have a test, and that test will be on all the next four chapters, right? So first test is 1, 2, 3, 4. Second test is 5, 6, 7, 8. Obviously, the next test is 9, 10, 11, and 12, right? So we'll skip the quiz today. I'm sure nobody will be mad about that, or skip the quiz for this week. I'll try and make it a little bit short, but still the same rules apply. Make sure that you, one, read the chapter, so read chapter 11. Two, that you watch the supplemental videos. There are 3 of them listed. 3, that if you're watching this, you are watching the lecture. The brief lecture, and then 4, make sure that you complete your discussion question, and I'll be sure to respond. So in this portion of the chapter, there are a few learning objectives that I want to kind of key in and point out, and also I'm going to skip the Reading Rainbow section for this time, just so it can be a little bit shorter for you guys. So just go ahead and understand what is meant by the term supply chain management. Understand the 4 components of supply chain management, and recognize the benefits for a small business in adopting supply chain management. So a lot of times people think these big overarching ideas only have to do with larger corporations and larger businesses, but that's definitely not the case. Those same things you can scale down and utilize in your small business. And obviously we're in a course referring to small business and entrepreneurship. The same concepts that you'll see in a class that might be discussing larger corporations would be the same concepts here, just maybe on a smaller scale. Some of the things that I've already discussed in terms of supply chain management, in previous chapters. If I'm a company, and I believe this is the exact example that I use, and I manufacture skateboards and sell them, whether I sell them to Target and Walmart for resale, or whether I sell them, through a shop that I have, I still manufacture them myself, and I need wood to create the skateboard. I also need metal for the trucks and things of that nature. But let's say the main thing is wood, and wouldn't it be great if I located my manufacturing plant right by where I'm getting the source for my wood? Then I cut down all those shipping costs. So you have to think in those terms, and think in terms of reducing the time frame in which it takes for the raw materials to get to you, and reducing your cost as well. So supply chain management is as old as business itself, right? So many people, you can go back in history and see how different industries, different companies were created. I was taking an insurance course, because a portion of my career I've been in the insurance industry, and they went all the way back to how where insurance originated from, and they said there were these traders, and there were ships, and the ships, they said, okay, we're going across these seas, and it wasn't like now. And ships obviously weren't great, and navigation probably wasn't great either. But they said we want to get from point A to point B, but a lot of times these ships, they crash, they sink, everything goes wrong, and the people die, right? So if I have a ship, and you have a ship, and then 3 other people have a ship, right? So we have 5 people with ships. So they said, well, let's all get together and say whatever the profits are from all of the ships, right? We're going to split that amongst each other. And that's how, they kind of created the theme of insurance, right? We're going to, source that costs across each other. And, if my ship sinks, I'm still going to get paid because your ship made it, right? So there's insurance involved in that. And then so they were, just explaining where the industry came from. So it's always interesting to kind of go back in history. A lot of times in these classes, you don't really go back in history. You just know about what's new and what's now, and kind of go forward from there. The owners of many small businesses may not pride themselves on knowing many, if not all of their, the owners of many small businesses may pride themselves on knowing if many, if not all, of their employees, right? So a lot of times in small business, they're on a first name basis, right? They know you. Hey, Carl, how's it going? How's the family? People have been over to people's house to eat, things of that nature. As they get bigger and they grow, maybe not so much, but when they're smaller, they definitely have that hometown and family feel, and you want to keep it that way because you want them to stick with you. You want a brand of a breed of loyalty from those people because you're starting something probably from scratch and from the beginning, and you need people that are in it to win it and with you to go all the way. Other small businesses may have some degree of familiarity with most of their customers, right? So some of those people, even all the way at the top, they know all of the customers. They know them by first name. If they have an issue, they don't have a problem reaching out to them. It's just a little bit of a different feel as opposed to a larger corporation where, like, say, when I worked for ADP, the CEO, he wouldn't know the first name of somebody in a small business because he has thousands and thousands of small businesses, but he has people who report to him to take care of those things. They have professional contacts with someone at the office or their immediate suppliers, and then that's very important when it comes to um, when it comes to supply chain management, because you're trying to work on deals and cut some costs here and there, and you need people who are able to work with you. Supply chain management encompasses the planning and management of all activities involved in sourcing and procurement, conversion, and all logistics management, right? So I never was successful, but at one point in time, I was attempting to get a job in procurement. And that's like if you talk about someone who's in purchasing, the person who's purchasing the raw materials, or even a person who's purchasing computers, hardware, software, things of that nature. Procurement is very, very important position within a company. Um, so those logistics management activities are very, very important as well. When is the shipment getting here? When do we start production? Those things are extremely important when you talk about supply chain management. Importantly, it also includes coordination and collaboration with channel partners, which can be suppliers, intermediaries, and third-party service providers and customers, right? So everybody who's kind of touching the business, you have to have strong relationships throughout. Supply chain management integrates supply and demand management within and across companies, right? So you have supply chain management, but it also is relative and touching demand, right? I'm not going to make 10,000 desks if I don't believe that 10,000 people are going to purchase these desks. All right. I don't want, a lot of inventory on hand that's already been produced. A lot of people, and we'll talk about it later in the chapter, we'll talk about just-in-time inventory. They want it to where it's getting there right before they create it, because otherwise you're sitting on something. You're sitting on some inventory that costs you some money that hasn't been turned into a final product and hasn't been sold as of yet. Global trade has seen a spectacular increase. Obviously, we know that. In the last half century, it's estimated that international trade has increased by 100% since 1955, right? So it's basically doubled, and that's no surprise, right? Especially with the internet, with being able to purchase things from overseas. Certain things that have happened throughout history that have loosened, the trade. Um, the confinement is in terms of how you're able to or not able to trade between companies or purchase things. You see companies like Amazon who've done so good in our marketplace, but then you see other companies that are handling and managing things in other countries that are kind of somewhat of what they want to believe is the equivalent, like with Alibaba. So you might want to check that out if you haven't ever heard of it. Rakuten, I believe I'm trying to remember which NBA team they're on. I think they might be on the Golden State Warriors. But it's so interesting, even when you talk about that soccer clubs, they were always had like sponsorships from these different places like Herbalife, things like that on their jerseys, and now you've shifted to that in the NBA as well, which is something that just wasn't out there in that type of top level American sport, and not that soccer is an American sport, but those the major American sports, like meaning like NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, you really didn't see that, and now you're seeing a shift and change to where these companies are like they'll pay big money to get that brand awareness and have those commercials while you're watching those sporting activities. The end of the Cold War. So that's one of the things I was speaking about in the early 1900s that produced a political environment conducive to the promotion of free trade, right? So that had a really bolstered free trade and activities going in that direction. Free trade advocates that nations lower or they advocate that nations lower or eliminate trade barriers and tariffs so that countries might develop some particular competencies so they can participate in the global economies, right? So let that gate down, let them do business and see how it affects the gross domestic product for all countries involved. Across the world, consumers are becoming progressively more demanding. I, definitely feel that myself. Everybody wants everything perfect, and they want it now. They expect better quality products with more options and also at a lower cost. One has to look only at the global market for cell phones, right? Example, even in countries that might not be classified or might be classified as third world countries, those consumers expect to be able to buy cell phones with cutting edge capability at reasonable prices. This results in a great need for new products, which in turn requires reduction in life cycle development times, right? So just think about it. Like think about what phone you have, and think about how many times you get a new phone now. And some of us are old enough to remember back before there were actual cell phones and we had, pagers. And then some of us are able to remember back where they had cell phones. And then, when you text somebody and you want to see, you had to hit the two button three times, right? So things have, definitely evolved quickly. But all throughout, the United States and also the world, people want things. They want them now, and they want them good, no matter what their financial status is. Um, Increasingly, more and more businesses recognize the old models may no longer have a function in today's environment, right? And so, people, just have just failed miserably just because they didn't want to shift to anything online. Like, you talk about Montgomery Ward, you talk about what happened with Sears. You talk about things like even like Circuit City and, Best Buy kind of coming in and showing, how they do it and kind of pushing them out. I mean, there were, like I said before in other classes, there were books written about Circuit City and how great they were doing. And now they are no more. I'm sure there are other books written about Blockbuster, and now they are no more. Things evolve, things change, and you as a company, you as a individual that owns a small business, you have to change and move with those times as well. Today's approach to supply chain management would be impossible without technological revolutions in the fields of communication and computer software. If you think about that, think about the port, everything's done on the computer. It's not as like done as it was before, manually, pen and paper, things of that nature. It would be impossible to operate in a global supply chain without the internet. Like it's just impossible. You're not sending letters. You're sending emails at best, sending text messages and things of that nature. So the core elements, and this is in your book as well, of supply chain management system, right? You have purchasing, you have integration, you have distribution, and you have operations, right? And then in the middle of all that, you have your customer value because you need all those things combined. So in purchasing, you have your supplier, and you have certain alliances, and integration, you have coordination, measurement control, operations. You want to try and be as lean as possible. Remember, I said you don't want the wood sitting up. You want the wood in production and making those skateboards. And then distribution, transportation, how you're going to get things from point A to point B. So the first four elements so one is procurement. Remember, we already talked about that. It's basically purchasing. Begins with the purchasing of parts, components, or services. However, it does not end with the purchase, right? So that a lot of times people think it ends with the purchase, but it really does not. Procurement must ensure that the right items are delivered in the exact quantities at the correct location at the specified time at minimal cost, right? So that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to bring those costs down and get everything there at the correct time. This means that procurement must concern itself with the determination of who should supply the parts, right? So, what company A, company B, who are you going to pick? And the components of the services it must address the question of assurance that these suppliers will deliver as promised, right? Can't be left on the hook if you're supposed to make these cars and you have certain parts that are required. You better trust them, and you better hope that they're coming, because they can slow down your whole supply chain by not getting you the right type of products at the right time that you need. So I already talked about this just-in-time, inventory attempts to create an inventory system where the inventory arrives exactly when it's needed, right? We needed 3 tons of wood, and here it comes to the door. And now we use it, turn it into skateboards, and get them out the door, right? Because we don't want those sitting there because we've already paid for them. So the money's pretty much burnt and used. You're not going to make your money until you get your cost of goods sold, right? So the cost of goods sold, right? So that's how much it costs you to make the goods that were actually sold, but now you have the money coming back into your organization. Distribution involves several activities, logistics, right? Customer relationship management, can be described a few different ways. Like a lot of companies use a customer relationship management system. So all correspondence can go through that, whether it be call, email, or chat. Um, so first and most obvious in terms of logistics is transportation of goods across the entire supply chain, right? Are they getting through, plane, train, automobile? How are those goods getting to the location that you want them to? So a few key takeaways for that section that we'll just kind of touch back on, before I end the lecture. And again, went a little quicker than what I always think or imagine. So the supply chain involves the integration of goods, finances, and information from the initial supplier to the final customer, right? So initial supplier is a company selling me the wood. Gets to me, I make the skateboard, sell it to the final customer. Revolution in supply chain management has been produced by globalization, changes in consumer demand. Remember, I want it now, 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 and I want it correct. Organizations that recognize that need for changing ways of doing business and technical innovations, right? You have to stay on the cutting edge. You have to change the way that you're thinking about things. Even like goals, which we talk about, a little bit in the next few chapters, they're not looked at the same. So first they had the KPIs, the key product initiatives, right? Now they have the OKRs, right? So they have their objectives and key results. We talked about the supply chains and their major elements. Like we said, it's the procurement, operations, distribution, and integration. Great diagram in your book that kind of breaks those apart. And right in the middle of all that is a customer value. And supply chain management should not be seen as appropriate for only large businesses. It's actually, very, very appropriate for small businesses as well. And if you're a small business, you very well might turn into a large business if you're doing these things correctly. And in those scenarios and in those situations, you want to look for and shoot for a win-win situation, right? So you want a situation in which things go great for you. You got the wood, you made the skateboard, you made the sales, you made money, and things go well for your supplier. Sold you the wood, made his money. Maybe you gave him some contacts to sell some wood to a couple other companies. So we want to, trust, goes a long way, and you want to make sure that you in business with the individuals that you can trust. And have form a long standing relationship. So that's it for chapter 11. Make sure you did the things that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Always here to assist. And then just get ready for next week and the test and chapter 12. Thanks a lot. Hopefully everybody's having a good week. Have a good day, and stay well.